The whispers around Boston are becoming louder, and what once felt like an impossible rumor is now being treated as a legitimate conversation. A blockbuster scenario has been placed on the table, and its centerpiece is none other than Jaylen Brown. The idea alone has sent shockwaves through the NBA landscape because whenever a franchise even entertains the thought of moving an all-star wing in his prime, it signals that something bigger might be in play. This is not about panic or desperation, this is about power and strategy, and Boston has always known how to pull the strings when the league least expects it. Bleacher Report recently floated a scenario that has left fans stunned. Imagine the Detroit Pistons sending Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland II, Tobias Harris, and a first-round pick in the year 2027 in exchange for Brown. At first glance, it looks like Detroit desperately pushing its chips to the center of the table, pairing Brown with Cade Cunningham to form a dynamic duo capable of lifting the Pistons out of the depths of the Eastern Conference. For Detroit, it is a dream of acceleration, a leap from rebuilding into relevance, and the chance to finally align youth with proven star power. But for Boston, the question is different. What does it mean when a franchise already considered a contender is presented with the option of flipping a superstar for a package of prospects, expiring money, and draft assets? It is not simply about numbers, though the salary relief is significant, with nearly $7.7 million in savings projected for the 2025 to 2026 season. It is about philosophy. Do the Celtics believe the next decade belongs to them through continuity with Tatum and Brown? Or do they see an opportunity to retool around Tatum with fresh legs and long-term flexibility? Brown averaged 22.2 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 4.4 assists per game last season, statistics that only scratch the surface of his impact. He has been one of the few true two-way wings in a league, capable of altering playoff series on both ends of the court. Trading him would not only reshape Boston's identity, it would send a message to the entire NBA that the Celtics are willing to risk everything for a vision of tomorrow that might look very different from today. Yet that very risk is what makes this rumor so electrifying, because if there's one franchise bold enough to play the long game while still competing for banners, it is Boston. Brad Stevens has been consistent in his public approach. The partnership of Brown and Jayson Tatum has been treated as untouchable, the very foundation of Boston's rise in the modern era. Still, history tells us that no player is truly unmovable when the right storm arrives. Kevin Garnett was once considered untouchable in Minnesota. James Harden was believed to be Oklahoma City's future. The NBA evolves quickly, and the great organizations are those that anticipate shifts before others can even recognize them. For Boston, the Detroit package brings intrigue but not certainty. Ron Holland is a raw prospect, full of athletic upside, yet unproven. Jaden Ivey is electric with the ball, but still learning how to harness his explosiveness into efficiency. Tobias Harris offers salary flexibility, not star power. And the protected draft pick in 2027, while potentially valuable, may not hold the kind of guaranteed weight Boston would demand. The Celtics know this, and that is why hesitation surrounds the deal. They are not in the business of trading one of the league's premier wings for possibilities. They are in the business of raising banners. The larger story here is the balance between present contention and future security. By offloading Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday earlier this summer, Boston already signaled an adjustment to the harsh realities of the NBA's new second apron rules. Yet the idea of sending away Brown takes that adjustment into an entirely new dimension. It forces us to ask, what is Boston's ultimate play? Are they simply trimming around the edges to survive the new financial era? Or are they preparing for a seismic move that positions them as not just contenders today, but rulers of the next decade? The beauty of this moment for Celtics fans is that it sparks imagination. What if Boston is orchestrating something larger, a multi-step plan that begins with whispers of a Brown trade but ends with an even greater acquisition? What if the refusal to act on this specific offer is not a dismissal of boldness, but proof that Stevens and his staff are waiting for an opportunity even more staggering? That is the hope driving this conversation. Boston has never been afraid to shock the league, and history suggests they will not hesitate if the perfect storm arrives. For now, Jaylen Brown remains a Celtic, and the team's focus is fixed on chasing the championship that has eluded them since 2008. Yet the rumor lingers, fueling the imagination of fans and analysts alike. It reminds us that in Boston, every summer holds the potential for history. And perhaps this is not the end of the story, but the beginning of something that will once again change the course of the NBA. Pulse of the Celtics, another weak trade proposal for Jaylen Brown. It feels almost surreal that the Boston Celtics, a franchise that has been rewriting the balance of power in the NBA, still needs to defend itself from trade proposals that underestimate one of its cornerstones. Once again, Jaylen Brown's name surfaces in a package that not only undervalues his stature, but also raises the question of how long the league will continue to present such hollow offers for a player whose ceiling has not yet been reached. The curiosity is not whether Brown could be moved, but rather why outsiders insist on imagining that Boston would ever settle for so little in exchange for a player who is only beginning to shape his prime years. The latest scenario, drawn up by Grant Hughes of Bleacher Report, suggested sending Brown to the Detroit Pistons in return for Ron Holland II, Jaden Ivey, Tobias Harris, and a first-round pick in the year 2027 protected for the top four. On paper, it looks like a collection of names that carry potential and short-term financial relief. But when you peel back the layers, the offer reveals itself as one of those transactions that would only serve one side, and is not the Celtics. The question that immediately arises is whether such ideas are crafted with genuine balance in mind, or whether they simply underestimate Boston's patience and long-term vision. The financial argument is always present. Hughes noted that Boston would save $7.7 million in the 2025-26 season, and that the expiring $26.6 million contract of Tobias Harris would free up future cap space. That is factual, but the Celtics are not a team that operates by chasing short-term savings at the expense of their core identity. A front office that has navigated the second apron with careful moves is not going to sacrifice a two-time All-NBA talent for a brief moment of financial air. The curiosity lies in why such narratives persist, as if Boston would trade generational talent for temporary flexibility. Then there is the basketball reasoning presented. The idea of pairing Brown with Cade Cunningham, Ausar Thompson, and Jalen Duren in Detroit is painted as a path to accelerate the Pistons' timeline. It is appealing for Detroit, of course, but what does it leave for Boston? Ron Holland II is an intriguing rookie who showcased flashes during the Summer League, averaging over 21 points across 3 games, but anyone who understands how the Celtics operate knows that Las Vegas highlights are not a sufficient currency for a franchise that measures success by banners. Jaden Ivey is explosive and has room to grow, but his trajectory remains uncertain and far from a stability that Boston demands at this stage. The trade proposal even tries to increase its shine by pointing to Holland's intensity and two-way potential, suggesting that he could be closer to stardom than initially believed. That may well be true for Detroit's developmental horizon, but for Boston the question is immediate. Does any of this compensate for the loss of a player who just led them to the top of the Eastern Conference and whose presence alongside Jayson Tatum defines the identity of the team? The answer is evident to anyone who looks beyond surface numbers. What makes this conversation shocking is not the proposal itself, but the recurring underestimation of Boston's standards. Every time a new trade idea emerges involving Brown, it seems to carry the assumption that the Celtics would be tempted by packages built on potential rather than proven greatness. And here is where the curiosity gap opens wide. What is it that external analysts fail to see about Brown's value within this roster? Could it be that his role is not merely statistical, but symbolic, embodying a culture that Boston refuses to compromise? The Celtics have positioned themselves not only as contenders, but as architects of a new standard in the league. The extension of Jaylen Brown was never just a financial move. It was a declaration that Boston will not be swayed by external noise. To believe that the franchise would now reverse that stance for a package of unproven names is to ignore the strategic patience that has defined the Brad Stevens era. The hope for Celtics fans is not only that Brown will remain, but that his presence will continue to attract new opportunities that strengthen the team around him. As Boston heads into another chapter of competition, the noise of trade machines will keep coming, but every week offer rejected only reinforces the message. The Celtics are not in the business of selling low. They are in the business of building dynasties. And as long as Jaylen Brown wears green and white, curiosity should not be about whether he is leaving, but about how much higher this team can climb with him. The Boston Celtics have entered one of the most intriguing and unpredictable stretches in recent franchise history. After Jayson Tatum went down with a torn Achilles tendon in Game 4 of the Eastern Conference semifinals, the front office faced a reality that could have shattered any other organization. Instead of collapsing, Boston's leadership immediately pivoted, shedding contracts, recalibrating its strategy, and setting the stage for a transitional year that still holds enormous promise. Out went Jrue Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Luke Kornet, and most likely Al Horford, names that carried both star power and stability. Yet with every departure came an opportunity, and the most fascinating piece of this puzzle is none other than Anfernee Simons. Simons arrived in Boston through the blockbuster deal that sent Holiday to Portland. At first glance, his acquisition seemed like a brilliant move, adding a dynamic guard who averaged nearly 20 points per game last season with over 4 assists and close to 3 rebounds, all while shooting more than 42% from the floor. His scoring instincts, ability to create off the dribble, and age profile made him look like an immediate solution to the offensive void left by Tatum's injury. But here lies the twist that few saw coming. Even before Simons had a chance to take his first official dribble in green and white, his name began surfacing in trade chatter once again. Why would Boston even consider moving a young scorer with such potential? The answer lies in the complicated web of the modern NBA salary cap. Boston's front office has been brutally disciplined this offseason, making clear that they will not allow the franchise to be crippled financially while Tatum recovers. To put numbers into perspective, Simons is on an expiring contract worth $27.7 million for the upcoming season, a manageable figure in isolation, but one that becomes pivotal when a team is already brushing against the harsh restrictions of the second tax apron. By exploring trades for Simons, Boston could not only reduce its immediate financial strain, but also position itself for flexibility when Tatum eventually returns to full health. The Celtics have already shown they are willing to pull the trigger on bold, almost shocking moves. Georges Niang was moved to Utah almost instantly after being acquired in the Porzingis deal, proving that Boston is treating this offseason as a chess match rather than a simple roster shuffle. According to NBA insider Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, the Celtics remain active in listening to offers for Simons, with the possibility of a deal valued around $100 million in total salary considerations being floated among executives. That number alone signals the kind of high-stakes environment Boston is navigating. The question, then, is not whether Simons can play. His production speaks for itself. The real mystery is whether Boston believes his timeline, contract situation, and role align with the grander vision of building a contender once Tatum is back on the court. Is Simons the bridge that helps the team remain competitive during a transitional year? Or is he the piece that unlocks financial freedom and brings in assets for the long-term core? Fans may be tempted to think this is a dilemma, but in truth, it is a position of strength. The Celtics are not desperate. They are patient, exploring every option and making sure that when the window reopens with Tatum healthy, the team will not only be ready, but be feared. That is the hope fueling this storyline. A possible Simons trade is not a sign of weakness, but of strategic foresight. Whether he stays and blossoms into a temporary star in Boston, or is moved for salary relief and future value, the Celtics are crafting a plan that goes beyond one season. While the NBA offseason feels frozen for many teams, Boston is quietly shaping a roster that can withstand present challenges while preparing for an explosive resurgence. What happens with Anfernee Simons could be the move that future historians point to as the pivot where Boston turned potential adversity into long-term dominance. Celtics have just received a trade update that could reshape the entire trajectory of the franchise, and the details go far beyond what casual fans might expect. What appeared at first to be a standard offseason of adjustments has quietly transformed into one of the most daring overhauls in recent team history. The departures of Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday were not simply about moving veterans, they were about re-engineering the financial and competitive structure of the roster to keep the door open for an entirely new era. Even the decision to let Al Horford walk was not just sentimentality fading. It was a calculated step toward creating flexibility in a league that punishes teams who hesitate. Now, what makes this moment electrifying is not just what Boston has already done, but what could still be on the horizon. Insider Jake Fisher has revealed that guard Anfernee Simons, who arrived in the blockbuster that rerouted Holiday to Portland, may not be locked into Boston's future. This is not speculation thrown into the air. This is rooted in the reality that the Celtics are actively evaluating every pathway available. Simons is set to earn $27.7 million in the upcoming campaign, a figure that forces any franchise to think strategically. The Celtics could decide to showcase his scoring ability early in the season, test his chemistry with the current roster, and then use his value as either a long-term piece or as the centerpiece of another major trade. The fact that they have not closed the door on either option reveals just how intentional every move is. What makes the situation even more fascinating is the timing. With Jayson Tatum recovering from the Achilles injury that will sideline him for the entire year, Boston is not approaching the season with illusions. Instead, they are using this rare window to test the limits of roster construction without the constant pressure of championship expectations. It is a gamble, but one with upside. By absorbing Simons into the system, Boston can see if he has the versatility to be more than a scorer. His career averages of nearly 20 points and 5 assists per night are not numbers that any team dismisses lightly, especially when considering his efficiency from the free throw line, where he hovers at an elite 90%. The Celtics are examining whether he can evolve into a secondary creator who complements the return of Tatum the following year, rather than simply being a stopgap. The real intrigue comes from how rival executives are viewing the situation. Teams across the league understand that a 26-year-old guard entering the final year of his contract with a proven scoring track record could become one of the most attractive trade chips if Boston chooses to put him on the market. That creates leverage. The Celtics are not desperate to move Simons. They are patient enough to wait until a contender becomes anxious or until a rebuilding team offers future draft capital that accelerates Boston's long-term plan. In other words, this is not about getting rid of Simons. This is about maximizing his presence, either in green or elsewhere, to ensure that the Celtics are not just relevant today, but dominant tomorrow. There's also a larger layer to this. By carefully managing the second apron tax, Boston is setting itself up for the possibility of adding another star when the time is right. The league has shown time and again that flexibility is as valuable as talent. The Golden State Warriors of the past decade were not only fueled by Steph Curry's brilliance, but also by the front office's ability to maneuver contracts and strike when opportunity appeared. Boston is learning from that blueprint. With a market as powerful as Boston and ownership committed to building beyond short-term fixes, the chance of the Celtics using Simons as part of something far bigger cannot be ignored. Fans may wonder what this all means for the next season, but the real story is about what comes after. When Tatum returns healthy, when financial restrictions loosen, and when decisions about Simons and other movable pieces are resolved, the Celtics could emerge with a roster that is younger, deeper, and more balanced than the one that fell short in recent playoff runs. Every trade rumor, every whisper about Simons is not a signal of panic, but of preparation. Boston is quietly constructing a team that could dominate for years, and the uncertainty surrounding Simons is part of the intrigue. Will he become the surprising partner that helps unlock Tatum's prime? Or will he be the key to acquiring another cornerstone who redefines the Celtics' future? That is the question that keeps the league watching and keeps the fan base hopeful, because either outcome points to a future where Boston is not simply rebuilding, it is reloading.